If you're a business owner feeling stuck, overwhelmed, and ready to grow, you're in the right place. Welcome to Small Business Pivots, where founders share insights, stories, and pivots that lead to sustainable growth. I'm your host, Michael D. Morrison, a business coach helping business owners get unstuck and grow. Welcome to another Small Business Pivots, where we have special guests from around the world that help you unstick your business so you can grow, talking about different topics. And today, our guest, this is applicable for sales, leadership, business ownership, decision-making, all of the above. So if you're struggling in any area of your business, today, I believe that we have some insights that could help encourage you. Our guest today, Paul, for those that don't know you, I like our guests to kind of share their story with us, kind of where you came from and how you got to the point where you're at today first, and then we can get into what our topic is today.
Well, thanks, Michael, for having me. And I look forward always to talking about small business because I was a small business owner. And just to give you a quick background of my history, I started out in radio as a radio announcer when I was very young. I quickly moved from radio announcing into management and sales. And radio runs on a model of advertising. Advertising pays the bills for radio. And I always struggled back then because my paycheck was attached to it as to why, certain ads seemed to work and other ones didn't. And the ones that I thought should work that had a lot of, great facts and, stats in it and stuff like that didn't resonate. Anyway, I don't want to, take the whole podcast just talk about my background, but eventually I moved through a few different markets and ended up in Toronto. I'm in Canada, and that is, the biggest market that you can get into in Canada. And I had a chance to work with some of the biggest advertisers. I worked with the company that broadcast the Toronto Blue Jays and the Maple Leafs. So I really got to see and study how advertising, particularly branding and marketing, was able to click. And I found out at that point was that it really had to do more with emotion than facts and figures. And all of the great ads that seemed to resonate didn't really talk about the facts and figures that often small businesses like to use when they're promoting their business. The car companies didn't talk about horsepower. They talked about somebody just driving behind the car, just feeling really great about it. Or the beer companies didn't talk about the hops they use or the processes they use. It was just the lifestyle that comes with it, and computers, a whole bunch of things. So I got so fascinated with that I really explored it a lot and did a lot of studying and everything from neuroscience to evolutionary psychology to just to understand how that works. And I did come up with a metaphor that's called the divided brain, which my book that's out now talks about it. But at the time, I thought I ended up quitting my dream job. I had a great job in Toronto, and like many of your viewers, I started a small business. I bought a very small radio station, and I said, I'm going to put this thing through the test. And using some of these processes, that's what I did.
Fantastic. Well, I know your book is called The Divided Brain. So what's it about?
Well, the divided brain in a nutshell is a metaphor for people to understand human behavior. It's based on a lot of science that is in the book, but I don't like to get bogged down in the science of it. I just want to talk about the practicality of it. And the way to picture it is that your brain really is divided in two, not the left and right hemisphere. It's really, there's a very old part of your brain, and this is the brain that we literally share from going back 475 million years to the lizards, and often the brain stem is called the lizard brain. And over evolution, over time, that brain has become, very much part of who we are and what we do, and still drives a lot of our decisions. The other part of the brain is what I call the new brain. It's the smaller one, and that's the neocortex. And this is where we rationalize, we think, and we plan. And the way these two work is I picture them as two gears that are interconnected. And the point I try to get across to people is that all decisions are really made in the old brain first. People that think, well, we're rational, we think things through in our conscious mind. It's usually not the way it works. 95% of the time, decisions are actually made at a subconscious level based on heuristics that our mind has through evolution that have kept us alive. And it's usually looking out for things like threats. It's looking out for survival. It's looking also for how it can thrive. And there's a whole bunch of layers to that. And it makes quick decisions. And then our new brain typically rationalizes that decision as the default mode. So the problem that I see more often than not, particularly when it came to branding and marketing, but also into business, is that people were leading the wrong way. And I tell an interesting story of when I had that first radio station and I left my dream job and I wanted to put this metaphor to work. We had an auto mechanic that came in. He just started up a new business, and his name was Ted, and he had 2 service bays, and he had, at the time, what was the latest diagnostic equipment. And him and his wife came in and they said, listen, we want to talk about, we're opening up this business. We got these 2 bays. We got this great diagnostic equipment. I got 2 mechanics that are, AAA rated, and we'd like to do some advertising, to promote that. And one of the first things I told him is that's not the right approach. And then I had to take him through this model to say, listen, I've actually come here to help businesses like you, and we have to find a different approach. We got to find what are you going to do? How are you going to make people feel? How are you going to connect with them at an emotional level? Which is difficult to do when you're thinking of a mechanic shop.
Absolutely.
But his wife was with him, and through conversation, she said, well, Ted is, he's so committed to his customers that, like, my car needs fixing, and it's been like 3 weeks now, and he hasn't been able to fix my car because he's just, spending so much time working on his customers' cars. And she was saying it in a joking, frustrated way, but I said, that's it. That is the angle. And, their whole campaign worked around the fact that Ted, fixes everybody's car except Benita's. And they had this back and forth banter. And that campaign lasted for 20 years. And a lot of people in our area are very familiar with it. And he grew from like 2 bays to 20 bays and did very well. But it was on, that concept of using an emotional lever versus a facts and figures lever.
So how does AI fit into this these days? And I want to kind of date this episode. So we're in May of 2026. So if anybody listens to it well into the future, we kind of know where we're at, because they say, AI is not emotional, but I know AI has to play a part in this, I would think, a little bit, since everyone uses it.
Absolutely. And AI is, depending on how you use it or how you want to use it, a very powerful tool. But, the thing that AI does very well now, and most people probably aren't even aware of it, is its algorithms are very much set up to actually talk to our old brain, the brain that they can get through to. And you see that also in all of your social media feeds. And a lot of what you're exposed to is it knows how to tap into all of your emotional levers without you even recognizing that it's happened. And it's passing the reasoning part of your brain and going right for the emotional connection. And AI is getting so good at that because it collects data on you through these algorithms. I'm talking more about social media now with AI, not necessarily as a tool, but every time you click a like or you open up a website, if it's tracking you, it's going to get to know everything about you, and it's going to be able to. At some point, you have to be careful because it can manipulate what you're trying to do just by the fact that it knows you so well, and it's using a lot of these techniques that I talk about. But also, I mean, today AI, the biggest thing I tell people to do if they're using it is AI. You're right, doesn't still sound like a human. There's telltale signs that you can see if something was written by AI, and it's getting better. But usually, like M dashes and a few other things are a giveaway that this was written by AI. Now, clever people, what they're doing is they're training their AI to reproduce their way of communicating and their way of writing, and that can help, and that could be a really good tool, but it's a double-edged sword.
Do you feel like once this is exposed, once people understand the old brain versus new brain, do you feel like that could be manipulative in the kind of the brain for a lot of people?
Yeah, well, I think the more people are, knowledge is power, as we all know. And one of the things that I do when I talk about the divided brain, if I'm speaking at a conference, is I will always, talk about how you can use it in business, always ethically, and how you can use it in your marketing, your branding, your decision making, how you talk to your staff. But I also warn against how you can be played very easily if somebody knows how to push these levers and you don't, either a person or AI or an algorithm. And again, just having that knowledge allows people to, as long as they understand that, the way the old brain works, and I can talk more about why it does that and why it works this way in a second. But the more they understand that, the more then they can start to see, okay, now I know what's going on. I see what they're trying to do. They're just trying to get my attention, or they're trying to rile me up, or they're trying to get me mad, or they're trying to get me excited. And just having that knowledge allows you to, what I say is press the clutch, and those two gears are connected, is let the new brain, which is our more new brain, but also where we do our rationalization, but it runs much slower. It requires a lot more effort. But you do a bit of critical thinking. You think things through a little bit more. And I'm sure most of your small business owners will tell you they've often had times where they're thinking through problems and they've come up with great solutions. And that's when they've dislodged the old brain from the new brain and really thought problems through and come up with that eureka moment.
Yeah. So I'm a business coach, and most people know that. And so I work with small business owners. So I first want to tell our listeners that if you think I'm talking about you specifically, I'm not, because all business owners are like this, which is indecisiveness. So how can people use this to make better decisions? And the reason I ask is because I have business owners that they'll come up with the solution today, but then tomorrow they're like, oh, I got 5 other things. Like, they're never quite clear on why they made that decision. And tomorrow it's like, well, this one might be better and this one might be better. How can they use this as a tool to make better decisions?
Well, the first thing that they have to understand is that any decision that they make, or frankly, one of their customer makes, will be made in the old brain first at a subconscious level. The old brain is always scanning for everything from threats to opportunities to these are things that through most of our existence kept us alive. And did a very good job at it. A lot of these things are called biases, cognitive biases, where we tend to use these mental shortcuts to make quick decisions that, again, for most of the time do work. 95% of the time, these quick decisions are the right decisions. And the new brain, its default mode is to rationalize those decisions, not to necessarily challenge them. And once people understand that, they have to, peel the onion back a little bit and say, okay, if I have to connect with my customer, if I'm a small business owner, I'm passionate about my business, I know everything about it inside and out, but who am I communicating to? Am I communicating to their rational brain, or am I communicating them on an emotional level that, again, thinks through things like fast making decisions? And again, are you reducing somebody's threat? Are you being able to gain some trust with them? Especially a small business that nobody has maybe necessarily done business with. They don't know you. And their guard's going to be up, even if they won't admit it. And you have to be able to bring those defenses down first before you start introducing all the cool things that you do in terms of your features. So what's going on when a lot of businesses pivot, like you just said, is unfortunately often a mistake. I mean, in business and in branding, consistency is and staying with it mean a lot. And when I owned a marketing agency, we'd have so many clients that came in and said they wanted to change their logo, or they wanted to change, whatever it may be. And I would often, tell them why. Like, you've had that logo for, 15 years. People know that logo. Now, it might not be the prettiest logo in the world, but you already occupy a place in your customer's mind with that logo. And if you start new, you're going to wipe out all of that equity that you built in the old mind, where people know what your brand is at a subconscious level, and you're starting all over. And there's so many classic examples of where that's been done. But the best logos have, some of them have been around 150 years. They don't change. Like, even the Coca-Colas and all of these things, they never change their logos. They might have variations of it, or they might, tweak it a little bit, tweak the colors, but they don't change it. And that's because the old brain likes familiarity. It likes what it knows. Anything else it perceives maybe as a threat if you change something too much. And, I always talk about music, for example. We all love music. Well, music really almost, I would say about 80% of the number one hits in the last 50 years come from the basic same 4-chord structure. Yeah. And any musician will know that structure, the 1-5-6-4 chord structure. And the reason it works so well is because people feel comfortable with it. It's a base that everything can be built on. So it doesn't matter if the song is rock or country or pop or whatever. They just give it their own flavors. The lyrics are a little different. The tempo's a little different. But that basic structure is what we feel so comfortable with and why we like it. And anytime somebody's tried to put out a song that doesn't follow that, never gets far. So for new businesses, I tell them also, don't try to be too out there. Try to do something that makes people feel comfortable. You can introduce some novelty. You can do something a bit different, but make sure that it's grounded in something that they're already comfortable with, unless you want to spend a ton of money to re-educate them. And, that's so important with businesses. If you have something and if you've worked hard at it and you find that it might be stalling a little bit, you don't necessarily have to pivot right away. You might just have to dig in and say, am I communicating the right message to my target customer? Am I going at them with facts and figures, or am I trying to reduce some of the emotional barriers that they might feel doing business with me? Do they feel like they can trust me? Do they feel that, I'm going to look after them? Do they feel that, they're going to get good value when they come through to me? Those are the types of questions that the old brain's always scanning for.
Yeah, you threw in so many nuggets in that statement, or those statements. I don't even know where to begin next, but I'm gonna try, because that was good stuff. Because it's like you mentioned, for instance, there's a reason why the Coca-Colas and some of these established brands don't change their logos. But my question is, why do you think, this is probably subjective, but using your basis, old brain, new brain, why do you think business owners, even though we know that, we still want to change our logo? Like, why do you think that is? Because that is so critical. Like you said, you want brand association.
The thing is, the new brain knows that, the rational part of it, but the old brain doesn't know it. And the old brain runs at a subconscious level. We're not aware of what it's thinking under the that blanket of consciousness that we all have. Things will come through from the old brain, and we go, "Oh, that's a great idea," but And then again, the new brain will rationalize that, but more often than not, the old brain would never say, "Let's change something." Yeah. They would say, "Let's keep it the same." Like, I feel safe here. I know the environment. I know in our old, ancestors would be always scanning the environment for predators or threats, and it always had a safe place where, whatever it called home. It could have been a cave for all we know, but at least it felt like a sense of comfort there. And when you try to pull it away from that too much by changing things, you're again starting over. And, in the book, I use Tropicana orange juice as a great example. Maybe some of your viewers will know this case study, but everybody's familiar with the Tropicana orange juice carton. Now, it has the orange with the straw in it and their logo, and you go into the grocery store, you see it, and it's been a staple for many years, and it's the number one selling orange juice. But they brought in a new agency I think it was in 2008, so it's just about been 20 years now. But this new agency was a new brain thinking agency. They said, you got to freshen everything up. You've got to change. You got to get with the times. That thing looks old. And they ended up redoing the whole packaging. And people can look this up on just Google it and you'll find it. But they came up with a whole new carton, and it looked really nice. But they changed the logo. They took away that orange. They did all these things to it that really freshened up the way it looks. But their sales went down $40 million in 3 months. And they ended up having to retrofit and go back to their old way of doing it, which cost them an additional $25 million. So there was a great, New York Times article on it years ago that they call it the $65 million, branding mistake, is going and changing too much because your old brain all of a sudden couldn't see you. Like you're walking through the grocery store, it knew you were there through its periphery vision by knowing what the logo looked like and what that carton looked like. But just changing it completely took them right off the radar, and people started buying other brands because they couldn't find their brand, even though it was sitting right in front of them.
Yeah. I want small business owners to take that lesson and make it applicable to them as here's a educational insight, because you just mentioned an old brand that tried to change their logo, change their look. It didn't work. They had exposure already, kind of captivating the market. People were familiar with it, how much money that took to do that. In small business, we don't have market share, right? We're just trying to compete. So every time you do that, it's going to cost you 1,000 million times more than it did Tropicana, because no one even knew who you were in the first place.
No, that's absolutely right. And again, the old brain likes consistency and it likes repetition. So it doesn't matter how you're promoting your business. You want to make sure that you're doing it on a regular basis, because it will forget after time. And you just want to keep it the same so that when they're thinking of your product or service, that will pop into your new brain, and they'll go, okay, yeah, I know that one, because they can pull out. The old brain is great at long-term memory. It's the new brain is terrible at memory, and it's kind of more like a desktop, the new brain. Like we can hold on to things for a little while, but if they're not important to us, they just kind of evaporate and they don't get put into the old brain's long-term memory. And most people will agree with me when I say, when you see a face, you usually will remember it forever. You could meet somebody 15 years ago and you'll see them again and say, I've met that person before. But very rarely can you remember the name. Most people don't remember the name. And the reason is because there was an emotional connection there that, of that person. And the reason the name doesn't click is because the old brain doesn't deal in language. It only deals in raw emotion. You made an impression, however that impression was, and hopefully it was a good one for them to remember you. Or it could have been a bad one, and they'll remember you for that as well. But the language part of it, which is the name, unless you're and some people have a natural gift of remembering it, but I certainly don't. I will walk into a room and I know that person, but I can't remember their names. Yeah. And that, again, just shows how there is a divided brain there and the way it works.
For sure. And I love your computer example, because You're listening to Small Business Pivots with Michael D. Morrison. If you're ready to get your business unstuck and grow, let's chat. Schedule your free session at michaeldmorrison.com. Now back to the show. For sure. And I love your computer example, because I would probably guess that most people can't remember all the icons they have on their desktop, but if you've taken the time to file it away somewhere because it's got an attachment, you kind of remember those files more than you would all the different files on your desktop because you haven't quite categorized them yet. Is that kind of fair, kind of similar?
Exactly, exactly. But over time, and again, this is where repetition will eventually get it in there. So, sometimes brands have to change, and they have to pivot. I mean, clearly sometimes the model isn't working if you've done everything right, and usually the owner, the entrepreneur, the founder, will know that because they will have stuck everything to the wall that they could. But a lot of the ones that I talk to, they don't, again, look at it through the lens of how people make decisions, this new brain, old brain system. And they're not making that emotional connection first. So I always try to tell people, listen, people buy an emotion and they justify with logic. So what emotion are you giving them? How are you helping them? Is your product going to help them look better, or will it make them, can it help them when it comes to things like their status? Will it, can it make them some money, or will it make them look better? Will it take away a pain, because pains live in, there's negative emotions too, right? So the emotions can be, fear. Can you take away a fear, a pain? All of these things are emotion driven. That's what the old brain is scouring for first. And then you come back in with, here's all the great things that we can do to work on that emotion. And every business has one. People might say, well, listen, all I do is, sell widgets, or, do something very basic. There's always a connection you can find out with when you look at, particularly when you look at your target customer. And again, often people that get a little bit more sophisticated with this will they'll try to create a persona of who their target customer is, so that they can really understand, how does my customer work? What are they afraid of? What do they like? What TV shows do they watch? What movies would they like? What are they, what's keeping them up at night? And they try to really put themselves in their customer's shoes and think through, okay, how can I, come in through one of those lenses, one of those filters, to maybe take away, if it's a negative emotion, to take some of that away, or conversely, help them with a positive emotion.
Yeah, as a business coach, I highly encourage our listeners to invest in this book in time of reading it and applying it. But on your website, you also have a lot of resources. Can you kind of share some of those that can help them as well?
Well, one of that's free to use is it's called the Brand Value Canvas, and it's an app actually that you can open up on my website, and it will, particularly if you're just starting out, or if you really are stuck and you want to reevaluate where your brand is, it'll ask you questions like, it first will ask about who your target customer is. And like I said, it really will ask you for a definition of who you're going after. It's the 80-20 rule. Usually, 80% of your business will come from 20% of your customers. Well, who is that 20%? And really get to understand who they are. And then it'll ask a series of questions that you would fill out. And it will start really with the facts and features. What do you offer that, can come through and this would be the way that you are going to come through with your product or service. But then it also will ask, what are their pain points? And then the third thing it'll ask are, what really are their hidden desires? What are they really looking for? What can they get out of this? And, it could be, if you're a house painter, well, the pride of ownership, they wanted their house to look beautiful. That's what really they're trying to get out of it at the end. Like, these are, again, trying to figure out what are those emotional things that we can tap into. Once you have that, then you look at your business and you say, okay, what are the features that we have? What are the pain relievers that we can offer? And then finally, how can we promote this or elevate them to feel that we're going to come through with what they're really looking for, which may not even be what they asked for. And then the third prism I put that through is, how unique will that be? Because if you're doing something that your competitors are all doing, it'll be very difficult for you to separate yourself. But if you can find that magic spot, and sometimes it might not even be self-evident to what you're doing, something will come out of that. And, we talked about AI a minute ago. There is an AI function in there. People have trouble with this app using it. They can actually click a button and say, take me through this. I need a little help here. And it'll ask you the questions, but it'll come out with what I call a brand promise, which is something that it's a piece of paper that you can use to say, here's how you should position yourself to talk to the old brain. But there's a lot of other things in there from the book as well that if they as a valuable tool, that would be a big one. And right now, you don't have to give me an email, nothing. You can go ahead and use it. It probably will have to get behind a firewall at some point, but it's getting used a lot right now.
Where can they find your book and those resources?
My website is paullarche.com, and my last name is spelled Larche, so paullarche.com. And on there, you can do everything from buy the book, and you can buy it through Amazon, Barnes & Noble, whatever bookstore. And there's also an audio book version of it if you prefer that on Audible, or you can get a Kindle version of it. But also through there are a lot of information about what I talk about. And a lot of these free resources. There's some PDFs there. If they've read the book, there's some PDFs, exercises they can do that they can download to reference. And so there's a lot of good stuff there. And also, I have a blog on there that has probably about 80 or 90 stories about everything that I talk about over time. And a lot of those have to do with small business owners making decisions. So hopefully that they might be able to find something in there that they find entertaining. And, if they want to buy the book, that's great, but they don't necessarily have to get some good value out of it.
Well, I encourage everyone to investigate and look into this because it could help in all facets of business and life. So it doesn't matter where you might be struggling or where some of your weak spots are. These tools could help you. And one of your resources that's valuable as well is you've actually owned businesses. And so the podcast title is Small Business Pivots. What are some pivots that you made in business that might be beneficial for others to know?
One of the big challenges for me when I told that story at the beginning, where I did actually leave a great, well-paying job, a lot of security, a lot of upside, but I was so excited about this divided brain concept because although I knew major marketing and advertising agencies knew this and how to work, and again, this is going back to the 90s, so we didn't have a lot of the AI and the tech. They had research departments and so on and so forth. But I knew that usually in medium and small markets, and a lot of your small businesses are probably in medium and small markets, they didn't have access to that kind of thing. So that's why I did, literally quit my job, started up, went into debt to buy my first radio station. And there was only 6 employees. It didn't have much power. But being able to, put this into practice and training my staff to do it and having them being able to do it. And we used it throughout everything we did. Really allowed us to pivot a few times. We ended up at some point opening a marketing and branding agency because we didn't want to limit ourselves only to radio clients. There was a lot of clients out there that, they weren't using radio for whatever reason. They wanted a website or whatnot. So we were able to do that. But also it allowed me to replicate this once I got it locked down well, and we ended up with 5 radio stations, and we had at one point close to 100 employees, and all of our sales department were fully versed in the divided brain concept, and they knew the line: you buy on emotion and you justify with fact. But we were able to pivot up, and I give myself a little credit for maybe coming up with, doing the research on finding that thing. But I had such a terrific staff, and any small business owner, even if they have 1 or 2 employees, will know that it's their staff that's really going to help them get to the next level. and they were able to take it further than I could, and they were even better at it sometimes than I was in terms of being able to help their what ended up being our clients, and as a result, we were very successful. Our radio stations really punched above their weight for revenue and for ratings, and we won many awards in Canada for our industry, and it was, and I had a very successful exit, at a multiple that is much higher than the industry standard, because it was a big company that bought me out, but they could see the value in what we're doing, and so those types of things. The reason I tell that story is because that's a 30-year-old hack that I came up with this, and that's why I put the book out, because I can share it now. I'm retired. I kept it for myself before and through our agency, but now I know that this can help other people, because it helped me, and I can prove it just through what I did, and and I'm not the smartest guy around.
Yeah. we never give ourselves enough credit.
Yeah.
But I will, what would you say, and you can keep these as snippets if you want, what would you say are some of the essentials that were required for your business to scale to that level outside of the divided brain concept? I mean, it could be systems. It could be, the people, kind of what are some of those things? Mm-hmm. Because I want business owners to consistently hear, you have to do some of these things, because we're so resistant in, well, that just sounds too hard. I don't have enough time to do that. What are some of those things that you really feel like helped move the needle in your business to have a real business?
Well, again, it depends. If you're a sole owner operator, you don't have any employees, so it's a bit lonely, and you don't have ways to bounce ideas off people. I was never in that situation. Even when I bought the first radio station, we had 6 employees, so it was a little group. But I quickly found out, and again, this was through trial and error. It didn't happen immediately. Is that finding the right employees are the ticket. Like, that is your first. That's the first thing that any small business owner has to do, is find great employees, people that are better than them at what they're doing. And often they say, well, I might not have the money to do that, or I don't have this or that. There's always ways, again, using some of the system, where you can make it very attractive for somebody to want to work with you. You might want to give them some equity. I had a profit sharing plan with my employees, because we were a small company, and when we did well, everybody would be able to benefit from that. And then we were very selective, and we did a lot of training with our people. I obviously would train them on the divided brain system, but we were very much customer focused. And, we weeded out anybody that wasn't going to get on the bus and go in the right direction. And it was the employees, for me, that was the multiplier. It was them that be able to, took my vision and being able to take it beyond my vision, and they did. So that was one thing that I always tell people, like, don't, and sometimes if an employee, you just think it's too much money, but they might be the right employee, that's, if you're going to spend money, that is the area to spend money on. And I know some people might now be saying, well, AI is coming, I'll just wait for AI. Maybe it can help you administratively and some stuff like that, but good employees are a great way to do it. And then the other thing you mentioned is systems, figuring out very effective and efficient ways so that you're not having to do things 2 or 3 times all the time, that you do things once and it's done the right way. And you come up with some type of standard of best practices that you can follow within your company, and they evolve over time. And you ask your employees that, listen, when we come up with a better idea, we'll incorporate that into our system, because our system is ever evolving. We're just trying to use the best idea for doing, that, putting into play some systems. And again, when I tie that back to the old brain, people feel comfortable with that because they know they have a backup. They know that they have, we have a system in place. I know that I can go back on these procedures if I need to. But we always told people, listen, this is the way we know how to do it. But if you have a better idea, or if you think you want to try something different, we'll give you the rope to do it, because your idea might be better at the end of the day. And that, I can remember that's happened dozens of times in our company, where somebody would come up with an idea and we went, like, why didn't I think of that? That's terrific.
Yeah.
And, we'd applaud them, and we had mechanisms in place to recognize them, that we were going to adopt their idea, and it was going to go into our book of, of
Yeah.
processes and systems. So that's a couple of examples, but
Those are great.
those really helped me a lot. Is that, I always said, if I got hit by a bus tomorrow and I was going to be in the hospital for 6 months, would the business be able to run without me? And again, this is the old brain talking. Most people will say, no, it can't. I have to do everything. I have to be there, and that's really that's just, again, old brain ego. We all have it, and it's built into us.
Yeah.
It's all built into us, and it serves a purpose, but often in the modern world, it can work against us.
Absolutely. And to expand on that just a hair is for those business owners going, do I have the right people? Also consider, do you have the wrong people? And that one person, it could be a business partner, it could be an employee, that one person that's consistently every day, every month, every year still challenging you, is that the right person to have on your staff, right? So not only bring the right people on, but get rid of the wrong people as well, or at least
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, again, every business has its own term. We call it ugly early. You usually can figure out relatively quickly. And, I don't know how many times, again, and this is in our company, but I've seen it in other companies too, where we just thought, you know what, well, we'll just give them a little bit more training, or we'll give them a couple more chances. Yeah, they've come in late a couple of times or whatnot, but we've already invested so much time in them. And again, this is one of the biases we have, is sunken cost fallacy, it's called, is if we've invested time in training somebody for 6 months, and at the end of the day, they're not the right employee, it's very hard for us to let go of that, because we've already put money into investing them in time. But the biggest thing, you're right, a leader can do is figure out when this isn't going to work. And, it's anytime you hire somebody, it's always a bit of a crapshoot. The interview can be great, the references can be great, they can tick all the boxes, but until they're with you for a certain amount of time, and sometimes the reason that they're not going to work out is just it could be a personality thing. Sometimes that could be it, but it's better to call it ugly early and move on, and not wait too long, because anybody who owns a business has held on to people way too long, and they live to regret it.
Every one of us.
Yes.
Well, Paul, you've been a wealth of information. Where's the best place to follow you outside of your website? Are you on social media? Can they connect with you there?
LinkedIn is probably I'm most active on LinkedIn, and if anybody just types in Paul Larche, it'll come up. And again, I put out a lot of blogs, posts on there, and they can reach through to me through the chat if they want. I'm on X as well, but not as much. I think LinkedIn would be, or just go to my website. You can fill out a comment. Like, there is a place where you can, if you want to email me or ask me anything, by all means.
And your social media icons are on the website too, for those that just want to go to the
Correct.
website. Well, I end with one last question. And today's question is, what is one book that you feel would benefit every entrepreneur if they read it and implemented it?
Well, it's a book that actually was a big inspiration to me and ties in a lot to with I talk about, and it's called Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. And he is explaining what I'm doing in a different metaphor, in a different concept. He calls a lot of what I'm doing System 1 and System 2. There's, Jonathan Haidt is another guy who's written some really good books on this, and his metaphor for this is the elephant and the rider. And the idea is that the rider is the new brain, but the elephant is running the show. And if that elephant decides it's going to go somewhere, you're going along for the ride. So these are all, interesting ways of doing it, but they're all the science behind it is very, very robust. And, people say, well, what do you mean decisions are made in the old brain before you consciously know it? Well, they can prove this. Oh, I'm sorry about that. They can prove that through all of these different systems like fMRIs and so on. So like fMRI studies and that, again, the science behind it is very robust.
Fantastic. Well, you've been a blessing to many today, and I wish you continued success. And thank you so much for your time.
Well, it's been my pleasure, Michael, and I really enjoyed it. And I think you're doing something great here. Small businesses love to learn, and this is a great resource that you have.
Thanks for listening to Small Business Pivots. If you're ready to get unstuck and grow, schedule your free coaching session at michaeldmorrison.com. On social media, you can find and connect with me using the handle Michael D. Morrison OKC. And if today's episode helped you, subscribe and share it with other business owners. Until next week, keep pivoting.